all kinds of different dispositions within this particular town. And, I happen to be a resident of Massachusetts, and I've spent a considerable amount of time up in um, Salem, for various reasons, starting from when I was in college. We would go up there and research the history of the witch trials and so forth, even though they didn't actually begin in Salem, as many people believe. Danvers was the very first place that someone was convicted of being a witch. Now, that's not actually entirely true. Back about, I think it was 200 years prior to what we understand as the most famous events unfolding with the witch trials, Connecticut had its own little dig in, or I should say, foray into that particular prejudice. And there's one particular place in Hartford that we can pinpoint as the very first execution place, and the trial had taken that stand during that time. And that's what came first. Now, that being said, I don't mean to digress in any way, shape, or form, because a lot of the focus does come back to Salem, because most of the documented efforts that occurred happened right there. But again, we have a very interesting show tonight. I have Thomas uh, Gormley. I think I said it right. God, if I didn't, I fucking pox on the firstborn, whatever. He is an event organizer within this alongside of Charles Rosenet, and I've just met him briefly. He was, recommended to me by Charles. Seems like a very nice guy, and to be honest with you, it takes a lot of passion and effort to put something like this together and then bring it to the people and have it run smoothly. Now, from my understanding, this event in Salem is the second annual Paracon that's being held, and we have psychics, we have different types of people practicing mediumship, we have authors, we have the amazing Kreskin coming through. He's a wonderful magician, well, more of a mentalist, if you will, sort of akin to Darren Brown, if you guys know who he is. And then we also have, people coming from Friday the 13th, part two. So we'll have some of the horror aspect as well. The actors and actresses be joining us. It's going to be one hell of an event spread over the course of 2 days, and it will be hosted by yours truly. Okay. But that being said, I don't want to take up too much time on this introduction, just to give you a brief overview, because what Thomas is going to do is offer a lot more in detail in respect to what you should expect if you were to come out, which I hope you do. Very light when it comes to the admission, and it's worth every penny to come out and see these vendors and to see the speakers and meet the people and ask the questions that you might have that I ask every time I'm on a show. So come on down, come visit us and see what we're all about. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce to you Thomas Patrick Gormley. Thomas, how you doing, my friend? Oh, there we go, sorry.
How's it going? So glad that you have us on. I know on behalf of Charles and myself and everybody that's going to be part of the Salem ParaCon and anybody that is coming up, it is a world-class event, and we're really excited to be putting it on for the second year. Like you said, not a lot to get in. It's going to be the 11th and the 12th. There's VIP tickets that get you in a little bit early, like at 10 o'clock. So you get the pick of being able to see everybody first. Then 11 o'clock, the doors open and it goes till 6 o'clock. And there is, people of the paranormal, horror, everything like that speaking every hour on the hour. And it's in, the Salem State University South Campus. So it's all in one big gymnasium. So while you're looking at trinkets at somebody's booth or just going around seeing some of the authors, you'll be able to hear the speakers all at the same time. So it's not like a lot of other Paracons where everything's separated in a room and you can miss stuff. So you're going to be able to see everything all at once. So it's just that type of atmosphere that's very exciting and people enjoy.
One of the things that I've always sort of detested when it comes to one of these larger events, like let's take for example, a music festival where you have 7, 8 stages spread throughout a cornfield somewhere, and your favorite band is playing over here at this time, and yet there's another band you really want to see playing at the exact same time on the opposite end. You have to make a choice. So I really appreciate the way that it sounds that you've set this up with Charles, wherein people can be present for those exposés, as well as still be there with the vendors and kind of work their way in terms of exploring or navigating, what's there to do just that. Um, Let me ask you, because a lot of people are folks that come online and they get involved with the topics at large, but seldom do they either have the opportunity or take the opportunity to visit an event like what you and Charles are putting on here. How did you get involved with Charles within this specific event coming up?
Well, Charles and I met a little while ago at a psychic fest, and it's kind of funny. When we met each other, we said, "Oh, I don't like you." So it was kind of a joking around, and we just got each other's humor. And there's been some people in his past and all that have helped him get to this paranormal point. And sometimes bridges or paths kind of change a little bit, and Charles had a path change on him, and I was there to help him out and help him, promote these events that are coming up. With my background in the paranormal, Charles' background, with horror and those types of things, and hence this paranormal horror convention that we're going to be having this weekend.
When it comes to mixing, new age spiritual concepts, paranormal, cryptozoology, ufology, health, well-being, Reiki, all these different uh, legs within the fields, do you have any reservation about bringing in, horror fantasy or anything like that? Now, look, I know that Charles has a good solid footing in that. It's just something I've always been curious about. Would you want to have a dividing line there somewhere? And is that, if you do, is it necessary to do so?
I don't really think the line is divided. I think a lot of people that are in the paranormal do appreciate horror. Case in point, some of the most famous people in the paranormal were the Warrens, and some of the highest grossing horror movies of all time were part of their cases. So those intertwine. Everything has its place, and I think that marriage of paranormal and horror has been for quite a while. When people think of the paranormal, they think of monsters, and monsters make those great horror movies. So I don't think there's really a divide. I think there's a little for everybody that comes to this, whether you're into horror, whether you're into paranormal, whether you're into metaphysical or anything like that. There's a little bit of everything for everybody that shows up to this event. You don't have to pigeonhole it. So you could go see your favorites and all that. So there's nothing stopping you or dividing you from anybody else.
Let me ask you this question, because as a fellow paranormal investigator, been in the field for a great number of years, I'm sure you've done the same yourself. We often gravitate towards the more austere end of the paranormal, or what people might consider the negative affects, because I think there's a draw to that drama. I think that you have immediate results, even if they're not something that is preferable when you talk about demonic energies or non-human entities, or whatever moniker you'd like to use. Do you think, obviously knowing that we have more benign or neutral spirits that are there within these folds of reality, if you will, or people who have passed on who haven't necessarily crossed over that rainbow bridge, so to speak, do you think we would still have the same fascination with the paranormal field if it didn't encompass some of that more negative type of experience?
I think when you really look into the community as it is, there, unfortunately, there is a divide. I think a lot of the negative is what Hollywood is pushing. Some of these people that do these shows, the only way they're going to do this show is some of these producers that don't really have much to do with the paranormal say, hey, show us the demonic, show us the spooky side. That's what sells. It's just like anything in the news, death and dying is what's going to show up on the news. You're not going to see somebody helping somebody else out. It just doesn't make the news. It doesn't make ratings. But when it comes down to the human level, for what we do, I'm part of my partner and I, other than Charles, we are the archangels of the paranormal. So my other partner, she's a psychotherapist. I'm a former corrections officer, worked in a psychiatric prison. we put that stuff together to help heal people, both on the living and on the other side. And I think that's where the paranormal is going to on the private side of things and all that. So there is people out there that don't need to be on TV. You know, for me, when I help somebody be able to sleep for the first time in a year, I think that's the great thing about it. And that's why I like to do a lot of these festivals, because there's a lot of people out there like me. Um, they may not do everything the same way my partner and I do. That's what makes it interesting to come hear us talk at this event coming up.
Thomas, we're going to get into the event here and some of the particulars that we should all look forward to. But before we do that, can you tell me a little bit more about your outfit? I mean, you definitely described a bit of your background there, your partners as well. Um, yeah, if you would tell me a little bit about how you got this off the ground, and you mentioned a service of healing. How do you go about that? Is there some sort of energy work that's in relate that, or is there some sort of mediumship that you connect with certain aspects of a person's energy or what's around them? Where do you go?
Well, my partner and I both, back when we were very young, I was 17, she was 16. We didn't know each other at the time, but we both got our start with the Warrens. And the Warrens were always helpful people, always wanted to help, didn't charge, just went out. And on that aspect of it, it always stuck with me that, I wanted to help people with their issues. About a little over a year ago, my partner, her name is Jenna Beth Rush, so she's on the poster. She'll be up there too. And her major background, she's actual practicing psychotherapist, but she's also a psychic medium. She's practices shamanistic practices, so a consortium of everything. And then my background is law enforcement. I do have an expertise. I did my thesis in college on serial killers, and I am actual profiler. With I retired from the state of Florida, and so I've put that into the aspect of it too. We bring that all together, and when we sit with clients with issues, sometimes the healing is for the client. They might have lost a loved one. There's that trauma of it. um, Sometimes people don't heal properly, and it creates that trauma, which leads to sometimes negative energies and all that. We could put that out there on our own and don't even realize it. um, and that's what we do. We also help the other side, because there are some people that pass away suddenly and they don't know they've passed away. Case in point, sometimes people think everything's evil, but when you really dig into the history and you really find out and you're really able to communicate. We had a case in Enfield, Connecticut, where we got an emergency call that a boy was getting scratched just out of nowhere. He was only like 18. So we went to interview them. We found out that the boy had some psychic abilities, and we think that the spirit was just trying to get his attention, because he's a beacon of light when a spirit could try and get its story out. So we were able to get the story from the spirit. Come to find out, he was a World War II veteran, was an alcoholic during life because he had PTSD and never really got over it. Because back then, men, they go through this, they're not going to go get help. So it ends up turning into a trauma, into alcoholism, treating your family improperly. So he was very upset about that. And I think that's what kept him from moving forward or moving out of into another plane. So he psychically asked us, my partner being a psychic medium, I'm an empath, so I feel the energy. She communicates a lot better, and wanted us to put daisies on his wife's grave. So we found out where the grave was, and we were able to do what he asked and put daisies on the wife's grave. And on the day that we did that, our client said that everything calmed down in the house and they didn't have any more issues and were able to sleep after a year. So that's really what we do. Um, and we've been very successful with it. It is, there's a science behind it also, and there is, of course, paranormal behind it. There is the supernatural that we've run into. And, I've been at this for close to 40 years now, and seen a lot of it. And I've never come across anything really that dark. I think a lot of it times is we misunderstand it and we put a label on it. And some people just don't do their due diligence to find out what actually is really going on. Just because somebody gets scratched or pushed doesn't mean that something's negative entity. That's what we have to dig into. Some people just want to get the evidence and just run out of there, and that's it, and put it up on the interwebs and all that. But I think you got to take your time with it. Paranormal isn't instantaneous. It takes time to really get down to what's really going on.
Speaking of the Warrens, one of the biggest elements within their research was based in their own conviction of religion. And I've spoken to, God, at this point, hundreds of people who've been in the paranormal field. And, I liken to ask the question about their thoughts of religion when it comes to this type of research. And one of the reasons I'm fascinated with it is because even though somebody crosses over or you have a non-human entity to possibly put a filter, from your vantage point, actually changes the extent of the investigation or how things are responded to. In respect to that religious approach, where do you and your outfit sit? And if you do use it, what kind of results do you find it bringing in a positive way to your investigations and working with people?
Well, my partner and I were very esoterically diverse, so we kind of make sure that what we're dealing with and what we communicate with, you get that essence of what they were. When you do your research, anybody that we pick up on, sometimes whatever their religious background is what's going to help them. So if I'm dealing with somebody that's a Catholic, then I might approach it that way. If it's a house of somebody's Jewish or a Muslim or anything like that, that's what you have to deal with, because that's their psyche. That's what they tune in on. And that's what's going to help them heal, because that's their go to. And even in the spirit world, too, if somebody dies of that background, that's also the way you want to approach it. We've run into places where, with her shamanistic practices and all that, where, you have Indian spirits out in the land and all that, and how we have to deal with that, because we have to deal with it in a shamanistic way, is what they understand. And that's how you have to help. You have to communicate and know your history and communicate exactly how they'll be able to communicate back. There's been cases where, you have a spirit that only speaks Spanish. So you're going to have to find somebody that speaks Spanish, because that's the only way you're going to be able to communicate and help. So there's so many different moving parts, religious wise, or just anything. I think with the psyche, more than religious, is just understanding, why people are still here. What's the trauma that's holding them back, or what happened to them, that's keeping them from moving on. Sometimes it's religiously based, sometimes it isn't. It's so open, and we have to stay open to that. If you're not open and you just pigeonhole it, sometimes you may miss the solution.
Do you find that, you had mentioned that you hadn't really come up against anything, incredibly negative, but, we do have folks that have a certain belief system that might encompass, let's say, possession. We know that there have been figures out there who've been, in their own right, amazing researchers, either intentionally or inadvertently. And Dolores Cannon, if you know the name, is certainly one of those that sits in the inadvertent category, sort of discovering her ability to dive down with people's below the lineman, right, in a psychological sense, to do the hypnotic healing and traveling that eventually she broke through, and these people were remembering, the other side of the veil, if you will, and previous lives, going much beyond that into different existences altogether. But she held staunchly to the idea that a particular individual could not necessarily be possessed the way that one would see in the movies, a spirit come into the body and then animate you as a puppet, or put you to do something against your own will. What are your thoughts? Because they could. My thought is that it's an attachment, right? We've used this word many times before. The verbiage is very much out in the open for the interpretation. It attaches to your energy and can influence you, but doesn't necessarily completely take over you. Where do you sit with your experiences on that?
Well, things there is the possibility that things could attach to you, but I don't think they could really hold on. Case in point, I was at the Lizzie Borden house and doing a Estes method with Dana Newkirk, and we were talking that we think was with Andrew Borden, and I actually tried to get him to admit that he might have abused his children, and the spirit seemed to have gotten angry, and I felt my blood, my pulse went up, and I started sweating, almost like he was angry and came into me, and but it was fleeting, yeah, it scares you and all that, but when you understand it, I understood his anger. Anybody would, you're getting, somebody's telling you that you did something that you may or may not have done, and you want them to stop. So that could happen, just like, if somebody's alive, they get angry at you, they come at you, and I think he came at me. But I think a lot of us, we only use barely 20% of our brain. We don't know what some of the other parts of our brain could do or make us do. And I think when I look at a lot of these cases that they say is demonic, I really look at the root cause. A lot of times I've run into, there's been trauma. There's people that have had deaths in the family they haven't gotten over. There's been divorces. The kids are angry because there's a divorce, and it creates that energy and that anger. People that are, you know, drug addicts, alcoholics that haven't recovered, people that are hoarders, and those types of, we have those negative connotations. And I think when they start eating you alive, your brain starts rewiring and doing things where it almost appears, I think, has a possession. It could seem that way in what we say it is. And, I know a lot of the possessions they use, like the Catholic priest is always the one to come out. But I think really what it is if somebody is Catholic, then yeah, use the Catholic priest. If somebody's anything else, it's a matter of healing that trauma. And I think that's when a perceived possession would stop, because trauma is the root of all those types of things. When you don't get over that trauma, you start taking that nosedive, and you get into darker things, and your personality does change, because scientifically your brain rewires. Even with a near death experience, your brain could rewire. And I've talked to a lot of psychics. Everybody has the ability to be a psychic. All right, they're born with it. But sometimes those near death experiences, I asked a lot of psychics, when did you notice that you were psychic? Oh, I had a near death experience, or this trauma happened to me, or that. It seems like everything's rooted that way, whether they're able to see the other side of the veil, or the other side of the veil has some negative connotations on them that takes over their mind, but for themselves. I don't want to get too religious and all that, but, a lot of people believe that, Jesus created, us, God created us in his own image, and his son died for us, our individualism. All right. And we can make those own decisions. And I think with our individualism, we could take on those traumas and create our own heaven or hell in our own self.
You know, I really appreciate your take on this because it's a very grounded approach, and obviously you are very thought out and cerebral about this. And I don't always find that when I talk to people that are in the field that way. Um, myself, I've had two separate incidences where I was followed home with what I had been investigating. In fact, the first occurrence, I knew this thing was there. I knew it was a non-human entity, and I knew that it was raised by people with malicious intent, but then had no idea how to put it back after they were done using whatever they were using. And the other one ended up being a watcher spirit, which, if some of you have been perusing the channel, I've done a documentary on this, just describing the story. But initially, I was petrified. I thought I was being attacked by some sort of overbearing, overwhelming entity that just happened to have, evil at its core. I mean, for lack of better adjective. Again, you're right. It's about how you see it going down to the core of what's there. The first incident, again, it wasn't supposed to be there, came and found us. And that's how it came home with me. And the second one, Yeah, I went to a place with a group of people who didn't have the same respect or reverence that myself and the two other guys that were with me had. Another reason I like traveling in much smaller groups when I do that type of work. But this thing probably knew that I could feel it. I mean, empathy, being an empath, you put yourself out there and certainly need to learn to protect yourself more than others, I think, in a certain respect, because you're able to feel those things, because you're able to take those experiences to a deeper level than, perhaps the average person, and, for whatever that terminology is worth. It's often been expressed in respect to a theory that if you walk into a place that's allegedly haunted with whatever type of energy, you yourself being the enormous energy that you are. I mean, you talk about the arc field, extending. Just the Merkaba is 55 feet in all directions. I mean, we're very, very large beings, and yet we see these avatars. It's misleading thinking that, we're only that flesh and bone. Do you think that there's any validity to people going into an environment like that, maybe themselves having some sort of trauma that they haven't worked out, and this manifesting within the environment as a result of their being there?
You're exactly right. If you have some unknown trauma and you move into area and in your mind there's negativity there, negativity, recognize negativity sometimes, and I think your mind plays on that. It's just all intention. Probably the most important thing in the field of the paranormal is your intention. You go in with the wrong intention, you're going to get the wrong stuff out. So you have to go in with that positive intention to get positive out, to be able to heal things. If you have issues going on and you head into something, you could leave with more issues. So it's scientific how your brain works, and you put yourself into a situation where you're taking in information, and that triggers sometimes that trauma that you're holding in. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like somebody puts a curse on you. you know Technically they say, I put a curse on you. Then all of a sudden you just stub your toe, and then you think, oh my god, the curse got me. And then your mind gets out of control. That's the curse, when they're able to make you think that there's actually something going on. So when you go into a place and you've already got information on it, and you got something going on, if you're having a bad day and you go in there, it just seems to just get out of control. And then one wrong thing happens, and then your mind just goes there. But yeah, are there other, there's energy everywhere. There's things that could follow you home, definitely can, and all that. But I think when that does happen, yes, you have to keep yourself protected, but yes, you have to know who you are. You really being in this field. I know there's a lot of us that get in this field. We've had traumas and all that. That's why a lot of us we go towards that field, because all of us have had darkness at one time. Because sometimes if you don't know the darkness, you can't give people the light. So that's why it's important to know both sides. You have to know your enemy to bring somebody the better. And but I think really you have to know who you are to really do well in the field. I think there's a lot of people that do well, but I think really to help people 100%, you have to have that great intention, and you have to be grounded to be able to do it.
I agree with you 100% on that. In fact, that is probably one of the biggest notes that you can give somebody just going into the field or having an interest in actually being an active participant at location or what have you. Back, oh God, this was 2010, 2011, something along those lines, where I had, these experiences. Yeah, I was very much in flux with who I was, even within the field, or what my actual intentions might have been. There was a part of me that was looking for a bit of that darkness. It was almost like an addiction at a certain point. There was a craving that I could feel within me, in my solar plexus specifically, would move into my heart, where I thirsted for that darkness. Maybe I watched too much, Ghost Adventures, at that time. But, we had a lot of examples that we would follow in respect to how to conduct ourselves based on those television shows. Excuse me. Now, obviously you've mentioned a few things about, syndicated programs. I think that those are probably the furthest thing from what reality is when you get into, paranormal investigation. I mean, there was a podcast at some point where, members of the, I think it might have been Aaron, who was mentioning, that they did falsify certain things, and they would pre-record EVPs, and you put them into the show, and they try to augment them a certain way. And the person who was mentioning this to me said, there were times where I heard the EVP, I'm like, man, that really sounds like Zach. It's unfortunate that this is what it comes to. I mean, ghost hunters, I even my outfit back then, we were able to prove that they had falsified a bit of information at the Concord Colonial Inn. It discourages you, but at the same time, it pushes you towards a real education in the field and how, again, to conduct yourselves. And it, again, coming back to knowing yourself, again, I think that's the most important thing that you can possibly do. Now, just for the hell of it, I'm going to ask you this question because I think there are a lot of people out there who need to understand what I'm going to bring up here, because they think they can go in there. This is like an overnight vacation. Maybe we're just going to go and hang out and do XYZ, not taking the fact that they're in a place that has a sensitivity to it. Maybe it's, the spirits that are there. Maybe there's some sort of undulating energy that might be worth that expression. Tell people why it's not a good idea to drink a beer and then walk into one of these places, or smoke a joint, or do something else. Can you, in your own words, really just kind of clarify why that's so dangerous, if you actually believe that that is?
Anytime you deal with the unknown, you want to have a clear head. Talking about drinking, yeah, is definitely not a good idea to go in, because you're not on the right path with the right intention. Yeah, I know a lot of people like to drink and smoke and all that other stuff before they, but really you're not in tune. You've taken those senses down, and I don't think it's gonna help. You know, Getting into this field, I take it very serious, and when I go in to help people, um, I'm looking to help them find a solution, and anything outside of that, I can't have that. If people want to get an experience, there are a lot of places that you could pay to play and go and witness this stuff if you want to get into it. But I tell you, I've been doing this before TV shows were on and those types of things and all kinds of different ways. So I'm before that. So I don't have the interference of what's been on TV. I know that's what a lot of people have gotten into it when they first started seeing, you know, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, and all that. The guys from Ghost Hunters, I love those guys and all that. They're great people. But when you have a show on, you could be at a place for a week and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Well, I just wasted all this time. We got to come up with something." So you never know. But sometimes the producers do things and they don't tell the people that are on the show things that they did, from what I've heard from other people. So I think a lot of us, when we're asked to do these shows, if we're not the actual last say in it, we don't want to do these shows because we're very, stuck in the way we do things. We need to help people, we need to heal them and all that. And I know maybe Hollywood doesn't like that type of thing, the good side of things, it just maybe doesn't sell. But the one thing it does sell is the people that are in need. And when you could help them sleep and all that, or take the fear away, is what happens. Just like you were talking about, when your intention, if somebody thinks something's haunted, then their mind gets away with them, and sometimes that creates more of a haunting in their own mind, and then you have to go and calm that down, take the fear away, and heal what's ever there, whether there be a spirit that's there, get them to be able to live together. Sometimes it just might be somebody's loved one trying to reach out and they think it's something bad. So there's so many crazy things that I've experienced over the years, but it's like anything else. We get so worked up about a situation coming up and all that. We get all worked up, we get that anxiety, and then all of a sudden we experience it. It wasn't that bad after all. So I think my job, my partner's job, is to go in, take that fear away, and be able to calm those things down.
Now, I'm really enjoying, the conversation I'm having with you involving the paranormal. I mean, to an expression that I won't even mention here, it's because of the grounded approach that you have here. And I'd like to have you back to do a full show just about, the experiences you've had, the outfit that you run, and anything else you want to share with that. But for the sake of time here, let's go back to the Paracon that we have this weekend. And very quickly, I want to just mention to the audience out there, right now, the studio is being renovated. We are finally getting the right internet so that everything will be up and smooth again. I can see the chat. I just can't respond to it on this medium. So, Mr. Catfish asks, what did you do with DHP? You guys aren't used to seeing me without my full beard. I know. Yep. So, same guy, different look. That's all that's happened there. But again, thank you all for being here with us tonight. Um, can you tell me a little bit about some of the guests that will be speaking out at the Paracon, and perhaps provide any details in way of their background, why they were chosen to attend this? What can you tell us about the people that we expect to see?
There's going to be quite an array of people. It is a paranormal horror con and all that, but there's such a mix. Probably the biggest feature is the Amazing Kreskin. So I don't know if your viewers know, Amazing Kreskin was always on Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson came up with a character that would guess things and all that. But, we even talk about it, like I was saying earlier, when you think of the paranormal, you think of the Warrens. When you think of magicians, you think of Houdini. But when you think of mentalism, it's the Amazing Kreskin. The guy's almost 90. I think he's 90 years old and he's still as sharp as a tack. And he's going to be performing. I think there was only 40 tickets that were put on sale in a small environment that he's going to do. That's a once in a lifetime thing to see one of the greatest mentalists that ever lived right in Salem. I says, you can't get better than that. And in the horror people that are coming, I know some of the favorite movies, Friday the 13th and all that. That's some of people's favorite. Bill Rudolph's going to be there. Lauren Taylor, they were both in Friday the 13th Part 2. And then also one of the other big actresses that is coming is Tara Buckman. Right? She was in Silent Night, Deadly Night, Freddy's Nightmares. But one of the big things that people remember her from was the Cannonball Run. So she was actually one of the ladies that was in the bright suits and all that, spray painted the sign and all that. So she was one of the drivers with another lady. So everybody remembers her from that. And the Buck Rogers, people that are in the sci-fi, she was on that show. So all the horror people are going to be doing a talk together. So it's going to be like this horror talk and all that, which is going to be pretty exciting. So with Kreskin doing his show, the horror people doing their talks, and then a lot of the paranormal people are going to be talking. Like we just talked about earlier about paranormal, I'm going to be talking about the same stuff with my partner Jenabeth. We're going to be the first on Saturday at noon. So we're going to be the leadoff hitters and hopefully get the weekend going in the right direction. And there's going to be so many people there. There's some people that have been on TV. There's a lot of authors. Probably one of the more popular ones is Sam Beltrusis, who's written a lot of books. He's been on a lot of TV appearances, just giving out his expertise in the field and what he knows as a clairvoyant. David Childers, but there's also one of the most famous psychic mediums throughout the country. Patty Griffin's going to be there. I got a few friends there. My friends, the Radicals, are going to be there. They collect haunted objects. And me being the guy that I am and did my thesis on serial killers and all that. So they actually own a fork that was confiscated from Jeffrey Dahmer's house. And they have that on display. A lot of energy coming off it. And that's like crazy. That's like a character in itself to come see. That's like worth of the price of admission just coming in just to see that fork. And so many people, my friend Adam's going to be there. Adam Began, the story, he's just such a great guy. He does podcasts full of energy. A lot of the people that are coming are under his wing and all that. So he's got a lot of stuff going on. But one of the big panels that's going to be also is Sam Beltrusis is going to be with James Anito, who's an exorcist. And they're going to be talking about the monsters and the paranormal, which should be exciting. And one of the other authors, Leanne Hebert, she's actually going to be talking things all about Edgar Allan Poe. So there's such an array of different things going on that are very exciting. A lot of the speakers just talking about the paranormal, everybody's different viewpoint. I look at the paranormal as music. You know, there's so many different genres of how people approach things, whether they go in just for evidence or they try and heal like my partner and I do, or they're urban explorers, or they're on TV, or author different things, or just researchers and all that. It's there's a little everything for everybody. You don't want to miss it. It's world class. You know, Charles does such a great job. You know, Charles has done this. He's done the first Connecticut ParaCon, which we're going to be going into another year. I think we'll be going into the fourth year of that. He organizes Dracula tours where he takes people over to Romania to go in the footsteps of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but also visit, you know, in the same footsteps as Vlad the Impaler. So those are like cool stuff that we do, and a lot of these we do psychic fest and all kinds of different things just to get people acclimated with the paranormal and hopefully learn it the right way, and you know, be able to see all these other people and get all their viewpoints to be able to come up with their viewpoint that helps them go forward and do what they want in the paranormal, or just enjoy seeing some of these horror actors and actresses, which is just going to be one of those weekends.
Has the amazing Kreskin ever touted himself as anything outside of a mentalist or a magician? And the reason I'm asking this question is because, the amazing Randy was able to debunk a lot of, these mystic folk that, throughout the latter part of the last century had emerged and had tricks up their sleeve, but they would claim to have psychic powers. Of course, Uri Geller is one that comes to mind first. I mean, I've spoken to the guy, on several occasions, and I'm not too fond of his disposition with certain people. It's nothing more than judgment on his end. But the biggest issue I've had with him is that he continues to say his spoon bending, at the very least, is something metaphysical. Obviously, we understand that type of touting is the wrong thing to do and sort of muddles between the reality and fiction of what magic is and what real magic is. So again, I guess the question is, does the amazing Kreskin have any history in respect to looking at his rapport as something more psychic rather than trickery?
He's been around for so long and been doing it for so long. I think there was any negative connotation with him, I think we would have heard about it by now. I never really heard anything negative about him. I don't think he comes off, you know, in that serious way. He does what he does. It's just uncanny. I think with him, yeah, there probably is some psychic ability behind it. There's probably a lot of things going on behind it, but you know, the man's been doing this for decades. You know, I've never heard of anything, you know, hopefully don't quote me on it. I've never heard anything controversial about the man. He just puts on a great show to the point where, you know, he's got to get paid, right? So he does this thing every time he does a show. He tells whoever's running the show, my paycheck you're going to give me, put it in an envelope and hide it somewhere. And for I don't know how many years he's been doing this, decades and decades, he's never not found the check. So I don't know the trickery behind that. I don't know. It's amazing how, you know, technically sometimes it could be a trick. If you know how people's body movement is, you know, I have a background in law enforcement, being able to read people, profile people, what their tendencies are and all that. Am I getting into a situation that's going to be dangerous? You know, it's kind of maybe the same way, but you know, the man's unbelievable. You know, I've seen him on TV and I just, you know, you don't know how it's done. But I think really it comes down to it. He's an entertainer. You know, with Uri Geller and all that, I think he really tried to get into different things and all that. And I think that's separate. Uri Geller wasn't really that entertainer type. I think he took himself more serious. And I think that's why he got a lot of flack.
As a magician myself, I did this professionally for a great number of years. There were many instances, especially when I was doing like restaurant magic or parlor gigs or what have you, where you're moving from one audience, very isolated, intimate audience to the next, just sort of creating a bubble, within each of those experiences. And there were definitely occasions where I lost the the spectator's card in the deck somewhere. I had no idea where it was. I had no idea what it was. Lost the hold. You know what I mean? And you have to kind of think on your feet. But I would find occasionally, I have my own intuition, I clairvoyance and all that stuff, but I had never really applied it in this way because I wanted to keep a separation in respect to the entertainment versus, what I might talk about at a more serious level. But there was a crossover there where, I could go through the deck and sometimes I would just pick the card or I'd be shuffling it and the darn thing would fall out. And they're like, "That's my card," and you just kind of play it off like you really knew it. And at that point, it's completely untraceable, the steps that the mind generally goes through to see where you started and how the hell you finished this particular effect. And then this is what they've seen, that mind just tries to retrace, but there's no way that you can retrace in that sense. Now I could certainly agree that the amazing Kreskin could have been doing this for so long that he's just in tune with that intuition. um the fact that he's so consistent about finding that check, which is a very fascinating way to get paid, by the way, is certainly something to note. I think that's really kind of cool. But if there is an intuitive play here, it sounds like, and at least from what I understand, he has sort of worked that into the rest of his show. But you don't necessarily see one act and say, well, that was purely psychic, or you see another act and say there was something contrived behind there. You just don't know because it's a very fluid type of thing. I'm certainly looking forward to at least meeting the gentleman. I understand that this is excuse me, vendors close at 6, right, on Saturday, and then the Amazing Kreskin is at 7:30. I think, is that a separate ticket? It is, right? I think you mentioned that.
Yes, it's going to be his legacy performance. So it is a separate ticket. It was added later. It's still going to be it's not going to be in the gymnasium. It's going to be in a separate room in the college. So really at 6, that being at 7:30 still gives you time to go eat, relax a little bit, and then take in an evening with the amazing Kreskin. Just going to He just blows people's minds. It's the entertainment behind it. I know we were going into a lot of the other stuff and the theories behind it, but really I think the weekend is for the entertainment side, the people that love the paranormal, they love the horror, they whether it's magic or mentalism or anything like that. He's actually one of the other late to the party, Joe St. Pierre, who's actually one of the more famous artist that actually drew Spider-Man, and was one of the highest selling drawers of Spider-Man, and millions of copies of his Spider-Man magazines that he did. He actually did um, a comic of the Amazing Kreskin, so they're going to be there together. So you get to meet somebody in that Marvel DC comic thing. So I know there's a lot of Comic Cons and all that, but so we're going to have somebody like that that's pretty well known for what he does. So like again, there's a little of everything for everybody. But that separate performance by the Amazing Kreskin, if you could get tickets for that, especially for yourself, being in that magic field at the time you were, it's that's always the challenge. Like when you're looking at it and you still can't figure it out, knowing you're in that field, I think that's what really gets people. And I think it's important for people that are in that field. It's like, oh my God, I don't know how he did it. So it's amazing. That's why he's the Amazing Kreskin.
you know Back in the days I was very active within the magic field, I mean, that was the crowning joy for me. And there were a lot of magicians, and still today the ego is very prevalent. And what we'll do is, we use a certain term, we'll try to burn each other, and maybe we show each other a trick, we've learned a new sleight, this, that, the other thing. And if you can't figure it out, well, look, that's the real magic. It's still there for you as a magician, and you start getting into this. Like anything that you learn the back workings of, it loses a certain appeal, or that magic that you initially were attracted to. um I was always one to be more than happy to sit back and be completely fooled. Penn and Teller, have done a great job of bringing that sort of thing to light, but keeping that childlike energy and the magic alive within the magician, which is then in turn reflected into the audience over a span of time. You have longevity to it. It sustains. You don't grow tired and bored of it. It doesn't stagnate the way something else might. You know, just learning the ins and outs of how it's done. So I think that's very interesting, and I do look forward to that. In fact, I look forward to the entire event. We are running a little short on time here, but I would like to give you the opportunity to share any more details about the Paracon that you think are pertinent, and then to piggyback on with that, how people can maybe get in touch with you, anything you'd like to promote. Of course, I'll gather your specific website after the show. I'll put that in the description. Right now, I do have links, folks, down to the information you would need to know about the Paracon. There's a handful of links there. Go through them if you're interested in coming. And I would advise, if you are interested in seeing Kreskin, to get on top of that now. I don't know if tickets have been sold out, but I can promise you they will be. So certainly hop on that. And Thomas, I give you the floor, my friend.
Thanks, my friend. But I'm just hoping all your listeners, anybody that's near the area, I know we're getting people that are coming. I think we got some people coming up from Florida, all over the country, because Salem is the mecca. It's Witch City. You know, when you think of metaphysical, you think of witches, you think of paranormal, and then, backdrops of horror and that history and all that coming together in that town. And just for the time that we're having it, that 10, 11, 6 at night, you still have time to walk around town and see history. It gives you that level to be able to spend the weekend there, see some of your favorite paranormal people, see some of your favorite horror actors, see the Amazing Kreskin, just anybody that's going to be there. In the school that it's at, the Salem State University in the South Campus, is a lot of times when people go to Salem, they go on Halloween, but you're never going to really find an inexpensive hotel. You got to wait in line to eat and all that. I think that's why we have this. It's just after, a few weeks after Halloween, the end of Samhain and all that, and everything kind of calms down. And then we come in and do this where you could really enjoy the town that you may not be able to during Halloween because it's so crazy. And I think that's what we afford to you, to be able to have that time and be able to learn a little bit about the paranormal, hear a lot of the different people talk, get to come to their tables and get to chat with them and see their wares and what they have, and get your paranormal memorabilia from everybody. Sit down with some of the psychics, and just maybe they put you on the right path and give you the right words to help you in life. Because there's a lot of people that have come to this. Again, like I said, people have some traumas, they have some questions and all that. The psychic mediums that are going to be there to be able to read for you, uh, it's incredible. Like I said, there's a little for everybody. And again, it's very inexpensive to get in. I think it's only like maybe 19.99 up online. I think it might be a little more when you get there. I don't think it'll be any more than $25 to be able to see some of these, great personalities, TV personalities, just people in the paranormal. I love these events because I get to talk to all these different people about the paranormal. I don't get to do that on my daily job. Not everybody that is around me in my normal job wants to talk about the paranormal. So I really live for this stuff and get the word out there and what we do and how we could help people, like anybody that's coming to this. And it's a small community, and we want to give the love to everybody, so that way they have a fantastic weekend. And make sure you show up, because some of us have a lot in store for you guys that I think is going to be mind-blowing. And sometimes, like I said, it might rewire your mind and put you on the right path. Sometimes it's just a healing type of weekend that you're going to enjoy, and have a memorable experience that you're going to want to come back every year that we have it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And when you enter a place like this, it's like family, because we all have experienced a certain ostracizing when it comes to, people in our everyday lives, either buying into what we're saying, giving us an ear, or completely shunning us, based on, certain factors that we have no control over. We have our own experiences. We're living that reality. And you are now in a safe place at these type of conventions to talk about that and commune with others who have had either parallel experiences, or something that was relatively close, at least in nature. So that's the type of atmosphere that's fostered, especially at this particular Paracon, being in Salem, where, talking about witchcraft and, things of that nature is not uncommon. You'll find people walking around Salem, if you haven't been, in full garb. You look at the doors, there are, certain symbols that are there that you could recognize, but this is the type of character this town carries. And of course, the Paracon will reflect that very well, being in the same area. And, the time period is absolutely probably one of the more important aspects here, because you couldn't pay me to get up to Salem on Halloween. Okay. Maybe if you flew me in by helicopter, okay, we could talk. But outside of that, it becomes so crowded, everything shoulder to shoulder. And no, you really don't have room to breathe. And there's so many people, and you can imagine how that unfolds. But we'll be there tomorrow. I'm sorry, not tomorrow, Saturday, the 11th, and Sunday, the 12th, talking at length with these people, and of course, come and enjoy what these people have to share with us. Thomas, I thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. This was fantastic. Just amps me up even more, makes me more excited for what's to come this weekend. And I simply can't wait, mate. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, my friend.
Very good, brother. I'm going to take you off now, but I'll close out the show, and I will talk to you soon, brother. Thank you so much. All right. Folks, this is going to be one hell of a show. Okay. One hell of a weekend that you do not want to miss. Now, Long Island Bigfoot, I saw that you were, reaching out to me in the chat there. I will talk to you after the show. You said plans have changed for you. Maybe there's a chance you might be up this way. Always a fantastic time with Mike Colantino from Long Island Bigfoot. We've done so much work together. I'd love to have him come up this way if that's a possibility. But I'll certainly talk to you after the show. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. And again, if you're in the area or close, come on by. $25 at the door for what you're going to see, people you're going to meet, and what you're going to hear is absolutely well worth it. I mean, you couldn't get into a concert for, the same price today. I mean, God, it's so expensive to go out and do some of these things. But an event like this, where the intention is to disseminate certain information, comfortability, and experiences, this is where you want to be. And again, I'll be there hosting, and Charles Rosenet will be there, helping that ancillary effect as well. Of course, Thomas will be there coordinating just as much. We all look forward to seeing you with us this weekend. And if anybody has any question at all, after going through the links there on the bottom in the description, reach out to me. I can certainly provide you with more details if you need to know, maybe how to get there. If you're coming from New York, coming from New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, wherever you're coming from in the surrounding areas, let me know. If you need that assistance, I'm more than happy to jump in with you. But in the meantime, thank you all once again for being here tonight. We will have another show next week. And I'm just going to tell you that the next guest is someone I've wanted to talk to for years. You guys remember the Puckwudgies from the Bridgewater Triangle? Might have the original story teller with us. So if that's the case, you certainly won't want to miss that one. It's a formidable story, and probably the most accurate documented experience when it comes to the Puckwudgies, those impish little beings that are mischievous in the worst of ways and nefarious at the same time, but they're out there. And I've had my own experiences with them, albeit it's been a little truncated in respect to other things I've been involved in, but they don't necessarily make themselves known very often. And not unlike the Melonheads, which are a completely different legend, they aren't seen very often. They don't interact. You sort of cross paths with them, unless they cross paths with you. Folks, we'll see you next time. In the meantime, stay explorative, stay vigilant, and in the words of the late Damian Gray, question everything. Ciao.